How it all went south.
Well, today is the first day of our new sign to the How It All Went South sign. This took, again, about 3 hours to hang correctly with supervision and guidance from Shane and Angelica, which you can say hi to here. But it's finally up. I think it looks really awesome. And let's get started with today's episode, which is going to be about the not-so-friendly murders of Palm Springs. So today we're going to hear a pretty famous case from the 1970s that has a history that ties to some of the old money families of the earliest 20th century and earlier. And the setting is Palm Springs, in a neighborhood full of celebrities living their best life. And the family that we'll talk about today is Edward and Sophia Friendly, and they seem to have it all: a beautiful home, a pool, all the old money, and they had their own share of exclusive guests. What are you laughing at?
They've got it all. A pool.
Yeah. Back then, that was a big deal, right?
Nothing says money. Nothing says rich like having your own water in the backyard.
I'm getting to that, okay? Mr. Bougie Sweater.
Oh, man, the sweater. I'm confident in my attire.
You have to be to wear that.
Okay. I'm confident in my attire.
Anyway, they had
It isn't like a nice cardigan.
Yep, I agree.
Oof.
Anyway, so they had their own share, the Friendlies did, of exclusive guests over to their estate. And the night of the murder, Sophia Friendly was dressed in a floor-length dress and was wearing gold shoes. And Edward Friendly, her husband, was sporting a jacket. And it was only going to be the two of them, like most every other night, for dinner. And they kept it a formal affair. The oven was still on, as the housemaid had just slipped a fish dinner for cooking in the oven, and the dinner table was set with crystal and a 6-piece silver service, including slender fish knives. Now, how does that sound for a regular meal at the Kipe house?
I mean, that sounds pretty much like every night.
Yeah, you wear a jacket every night?
A sweater or a jacket, tomato. No, but you know what we do have now? My kid is almost 3, and he's gotten into this thing now where he's like, we made the mistake one night of having candles lit. For whatever reason, my wife lit, candles on the dinner table. So now my kid says, every night we sit down to dinner, we cannot eat dinner without 2 candles being lit on the.
That might not be a bad thing.
It's not, but so I feel a little fancier,
I was just struck. It's the two of them in their fancy Palm Springs house, and even though it's the maid and the two of them, they're getting dressed up for dinner every night with a formal place setting. Yeah. So it sets the scene of what this story is really going to be about and how prominent they are. Yeah. And how bad things go.
That is a lifestyle that I do not know anything about.
Yeah. So our story kicks off on October 12th, 1978, like I said, in Palm Springs, California. And early one Friday morning, a pool man discovered the lifeless body of Frances Williams, the family maid. And she was lying in a pool of blood with a bullet to her head. It was Williams who had just put a fish dinner in the oven and set the table for the meal for the two of the Friendlies. So Sophia Friendly, the matron of the home, was found dead in the hallway, having been shot in the back of the head as she tried to flee. And her husband, Edward Friendly, was found in the study, slumped in a chair with the TV blaring, and he had been shot twice. And although the house appeared ransacked, nothing of value was taken. Shell casings were found at the scene, and a fedora was tossed over Sophia's face, suggesting that her death was particularly. You told me to do that. Just don't do it in the middle of recording, right? Let me back up. Sean says if you stumble over a word, just do that and you'll be better. But I didn't listen when he said...
Yeah, but you don't make eye contact with another adult and go... I get hot when I laugh.
Yeah. Well, hey, I'm here for it. Anyway, let me back up a little bit. So, although the house had...
Back up before that thing.
Yeah, we're gonna keep it in, but we're also gonna back up a little bit. Okay, so although the house appeared ransacked, nothing of value was taken, and shell casings were found at the scene, and a fedora was tossed over Sophia's face, suggesting her death was significant to the killer, and was the only evidence really discovered by investigators. So the killer's intentions remained unclear. Initially, police ruled out robbery and focused on Edward's troubled business ventures. But the investigation shifted when they learned of the family's disputes, of course, over money. Sophia had amended her will to disinherit her children after they contested her control over a San Francisco townhouse. Her children were due to inherit substantial trust funds only if she died before her ex-husband, Curtis Hutton, who was terminally ill. This is the story of the not-so-friendly family murders. I'm Jason Hoch, and this is Sean Kipe. And live from 800 East Studios in Atlanta, this is How It All Went South. All right, well, let's get started with our actual story. We framed it about Edward and Sophia Friendly. And like I said, this story involves some of the wealthiest families of the 20th century. The Woolworths, you remember Woolworths? You ever heard of Woolworths?
Oh, yeah.
Five and dime store fame.
Stay out of the Woolworths.
Yep. The Huttons of E.F. Hutton. Remember E.F. Hutton, those commercials? No? Okay, you're too young. And Talbot's, the lumber and shipping dynasty. It crossed over to Hollywood names such as Cary Grant, Dean Martin, Kirk Douglas, Liberace, and television producers, wine experts, and of course, mysterious suspects in the infamous Friendly murders of Palm Springs, California. On the early Friday morning of October 12, 1978, a poolman headed for the backyard and saw Frances Williams through the kitchen window. Frances Williams, the family maid, lay motionless in a pool of blood with a bullet to the head, fired point blank against her forehead. The shot had blown her back against the refrigerator, and now she was on the floor of the kitchen. Really nasty.
No, I was just thinking, like the way you described that, just point blank. A lot of times when I hear point blank, it just means really close, not actually like
sends you across the room. It was so close
on the skin, and
it gets worse with the Friendlies too. So Sophia Friendly lay dead in the hallway, still clutching her glasses. A police reconstruction of the events suggested that the killer walked in the front door sometime around 6:30 p.m., and Sophia, who likely answered the door, turned to flee down the hallway when she was shot in the back of the head, dying instantly. The bullet split in two, exiting through the bridge and left side of her nose. Again, really, really bad.
That's interesting.
In the study, Edward Friendly sat slumped in a chair. The television was blaring, and so he probably didn't hear what the intruders in the house. So 2 bullets killed him. The first to the chest, which threw him against the bookcase and splattered blood everywhere. And the second, a direct shot to the head that split open his skull.
Were they using a bazooka?
I don't know. Well, there is evidence of what gun they actually used. I'll get to that in a little bit.
A big one.
So Edward wore a hearing aid due to hearing loss, and he may have been unaware of the shots that had been fired earlier and did not hear the killer's approach. He had turned in his chair, but had not risen to his feet when the killer struck a third time.
I'm just picturing this old man with his hearing aids aren't working. He's got the TV on, and there's
watching
all this carnage going on behind him.
He's watching All in the Family,
He's sipping his martini or whatever.
So, yeah, exactly. Well, he changed jackets from probably, from room to room. Yeah. So photos and papers were scattered about, and his pants pockets turned inside out. Several dresser drawers were pulled out, yet nothing seemed to be taken, including valuables like a considerable amount of jewelry, valuable paintings, as you would imagine, and $400 in cash left in plain view inside a wallet. However, shell casings left on the floor of the hallway, kitchen, and den provided what little evidence investigators could discover at the scene. Like I said, before leaving, the killer tossed a man's fedora over the face of Sophia Friendly. This felt strangely specific and meaningful, but no one knew why. That's a weird thing to do.
Yeah.
She's already dead.
Yeah, sure. That's almost like, when you have someone who does a murder, commits a murder, and they disfigure the face, usually of like a female for some reason. I think we talked about that in one of the other things where someone had cut the eyes out.
Yeah.
Over a jealousy thing, or maybe it was not wanting to look at somebody in the face.
But you would imagine this feels not random, but very specific. Like someone walked in with a very much of an intent on doing this, especially in this neighborhood. Like it wasn't just like, I'm going to rob stuff, because they didn't really take anything.
Well, yeah, and you have the guy that apparently, older guy that didn't even know this was happening, and they went and killed him. So it's not like he walked in on it.
Investigators said the victims' heads were destroyed and their bodies were so bloody that it was difficult to distinguish the race of the maid, Miss Williams.
Wow.
Not good. Remember, it was the pool man that discovered the murder scene, and he didn't find Sophia, Ed, or their maid Frances until 12 hours later. Police said a professional assassin may have been behind this. No neighbors heard any of the gunshots, and once again, the oven was still on. 4 casings of a .45 caliber handgun were found on site, suspected to come from a Spanish-made Star PD .45 pistol. What had happened was a mystery.
A 45 is what I was thinking. It had to be something big like that. But have you ever shot a 45?
No.
Yeah, I mean, I've shot bigger guns than that, but that is and you think of like a Desert Eagle or something. I'm just thinking of point blank, putting a gun like that on someone. I mean, what that would do.
Like I said,
it's really gruesome.
Really gruesome, really bloody, and like I said, they barely even recognized their maid, Miss Williams, because she had been destroyed so terribly.
Yeah.
But yeah, throw a hat over or a fedora over Sophia Friendly, and that's going to make things better. Sure.
But maybe, I mean,
is that?
I'm almost wondering if that's like that.
Is that like a letter? Like it was for her, and that's why they did that, and the other 2 were random, or what do you think about that?
I just am thinking with something like that, maybe it was visually just a little too much, and they just want like Jesus.
Yeah.
Put the hat over. That's kind of almost split your head in 2, and potentially.
Yeah.
I mean, at point blank like that. So
I wasn't splitting hairs.
No.
In the other direction, because she was running away from the.
She was running away.
She was running away. Yeah. So maybe it was just like.
But the fact that she was running away and then they still caught her and fired at point blank is even worse.
Yeah, that's intentional. That's some sort of like almost malice.
So, but any thoughts so far on who you think the main target is based on what you know right now?
No, not really. I mean, because you've got...
It's early, I know. We'll get into it. A little bit of Edward. Remember, Edward's business dealings, a little bit unsure of how that goes. And with Sophia, this family drama and this inheritance that could happen.
Yeah, you almost... I don't know what kind of money we're talking about, but if you're wearing a dinner jacket at home on a Tuesday evening... it's probably a substantial amount of money that they had. So, I'm kind of leaning towards maybe there's some kids or somebody's looking for the money, and the inheritance is only family related. So,
well, let's get into some of the backstory here. So police initially thought it was Edward because of his wealth as realtor and a stockbroker. He'd been an executive at racetracks in California, including one that had burned down after he sold it. Now, Sophia Friendly had deep generational wealth from family ties to both the E.F. Hutton family and the Woolworths, like I talked about. And they're sort of like for people who don't know that, they're kind of like early 20th century
Macy's.
Walmart or Macy's, where you could kind of get anything from clothes to all the stuff for your home and so on and so forth. Her father was a doctor, but the family wealth came from Talbot's, full of expansive businesses in lumber, barges, and huge swaths of land in the States.
So they were loaded. Yeah. When you talk about lumber, timber, especially in that time.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's generational wealth like that, timber, turn of the century, if you were successful in that, you were loaded.
Yeah. So police quickly ruled out robbery as the motive, despite reports that the Friendly's home had been burglarized in May of the year prior, and instead focused on Edward Friendly's troubled business ventures. But the investigation took that turn, like I said, when police learned there was bad blood between Sophia Friendly and her children, stemming from bitter disputes, of course, for money. She had cut them out of her will. Further probing revealed that a substantial amount of wealth was due to be inherited. Family members confirmed that Sophia Friendly was the beneficiary of multi-generational trust funds, including a $1 million trust fund awarded to her ex-husband, Curtis Hutton, years earlier by Barbara Hutton, the heiress to the Woolworth fortune. Now, have you ever heard of Barbara Hutton at all? Does that name ring a bell?
I just keep thinking Barbara Sutton. Isn't she an actress?
No, not the same thing. Barbara Hutton. So Barbara was famously known as the poor little rich girl for the adversity she had faced despite swimming in wealth. She was married 7 times, including the Hollywood legend Cary Grant.
Wow.
Yeah. So when you see a picture of Barbara Hutton, what do you think?
I mean, not the worst looking gal, but you can tell. I mean, just you look at those old pictures like that; they all just look like porcelain dolls.
Yeah,
you
a
know,
little bit of like Hollywood glamour and fancy dress. Again,
like flapper
everyone
dress.
in this episode is dressing fancily, right?
Yeah, but I mean, you can tell just from the pictures I'm looking at that she has money.
She had a lot, and she had pretty much a tough life despite having all this wealth. That was why she was called poor little rich girl. Barbara had left $1 million trust for Sophia's first husband and Barbara's cousin, Curtis Hutton, way back in the 30s. So fast forward to 1978, and Curtis Hutton, Sophia's ex-husband, was now battling cancer. The trust stipulated that if her ex-husband Curtis died before her, Sophia Friendly would receive the money, not their children, one of which was Edward Hutton. Now, Edward Hutton is the other Edward, not to be confused with Edward Friendly, who was the one that died at the house. So don't confuse him. And so Curtis's son and daughter would inherit the money only if their mother, Sophia Friendly, died before their father, Curtis. So Curtis Hutton, again, battling cancer. And so the matter of who died first was critical in the inheritance.
Sure. Yeah.
2 weeks. So he's going to die.
Yeah.
But this happened.
So they've kind of given him 2 weeks to live.
Well, we don't know exactly. I mean, he's on his last legs.
He was, deathbed kind of.
And this happened. Yeah. And this happens 2 weeks before.
Yeah, super
sketch, right?
Yeah.
So Edward Sutton, sister, also named Sophia, said she had called her brother.
See, when you're really rich like that, there are like 4 family names. Everyone just gets them. You're identified by the Roman numeral after that.
Yeah. Edward Friendly, Sophia Friendly, and then Edward Sutton and Sophia Sutton, who are the children of Sophia Friendly with Curtis. I hope that clears it up. It's not that complicated, but there's a lot of Edwards. And so for the most of the rest of this story, I will be referencing Edward Hutton and Sophia Hutton, the kids. Okay. So I'll try to call that out as much as possible. So Edward Sutton's sister also, and Sophia, called Sophia, said she had called her brother Edward about her father quickly approaching death as the cancer continued to advance. Edward arrived to see his father with a man named Andreas Christensen in tow. And Sophia later told Du Jour magazine that a week or so later, that's Edward Hutton, arrives in Santa Barbara with this strange man that he had not mentioned before. His name was Andreas Christensen, and he was introduced to us as a good friend of Edward's from his time in London. They had supposedly worked together, but at what was something of a mystery. She said this man, Andreas Christensen, was scary and cold as ice.
Some shady business he was involved in?
Yeah, this mystery guy.
Or he was a lifelong friend.
I'm not sure what's going on with this guy, but he just kind of appears and disappears conveniently during the story.
Yeah.
So Edward Hutton later denied that Andreas Christensen was ever there that day at his father's place. So there's no good truth here that we're able to track down who's telling the story. And again, about 2 weeks after Sophia and Edward Friendly were murdered, Curtis passed away. The trust could then pass to the children of Sophia and Curtis and was worth a lot more than the original $1 million now. This now was the focus of investigators, the deaths being so close together and the money there for the grabbing after all these years. So yeah, it's all happened in this short time frame.
Yeah, and I mean, anytime there's a suspicious death, in which this is far more than suspicious, just a mass murder like this. But anytime there's a will that's contested, or inheritance, or they have a lot of money, I mean, it's never clean and cut and dry.
Yeah.
I think,
It gets weird, right? Yeah, it gets better. A little bit of background. They had met, Edward and Andreas, in the early 1970s at Lord Nelson pub in London, and were reportedly bridge partners. That day, during the visit with Curtis, he talked about guns. Convenient, right? So it was well known that the son, Edward Hutton, was under severe financial strain when he returned from the United States from London earlier that year. His career had stalled, compounded by the aftermath of a bad divorce and mounting debts. Tick, 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 tick.
Right, yeah.
So we're going to find out about this mystery man, Andreas Christensen, after we take a break. We're back from the break, and we were talking about kind of all this drama around this 2 weeks in the inheritance. So Edward Hutton and his sister, Sophia, contested and sought a share of the sale of the townhouse. Their mother's refusal to let their stepfather to warn them that if they continued to protest, they would be disinherited. Undeterred, the younger Sophia sued her mother over the deed of the $250,000 Las Palmas home. And this is where things really blew up. In March 1977, Sophia Friendly amended her will, explicitly disinheriting her 2 children. So there's all this money just floating around, and no one's happy, no one's getting what they want, everyone's miserable, and of course Sophia Friendly is dead.
And Dad's got gambling debts.
Right.
Stepdad.
Yeah. Who's Edward Friendly. Not to confuse.
No, not at all.
And so remember that trust would go to the kids if she died. Like I said before, Curtis died on October 26, 1978, at the age of 77. And then Sophia and Edward were going to split the Barbara Hutton Trust, which had grown to $1.3 million. And Edward Hutton confirmed that he did actually get that money. So it is actually in his hands now. And there's other inherited trust funds that are still set to come to them too.
Yeah, I was going to say, because $1 million, I was thinking this was a lot more money. I mean, even in the 70s, I was thinking there was a lot more money. That's not it, right? I mean,
there's still stuff coming from like the lumber empire and all
right,
that stuff. But this is just so ingrained in the family drama that they just everyone wants to grab onto this, or just screw the other person more than anything, right? The principle of it all. All right, so we're going to talk about Edward Hutton and this man, Andreas Christensen, whoever this mystery guy is. He was from Scandinavia. He was a criminal that had met with Hutton before the murder. And if there was a connection between the two men and the murder of the Friendlies and their maid, it may have been easier to stage a break-in and slip away with no physical tracks left behind. Remember, Sophia dying first before Curtis was key. So before authorities could speak with the mystery man, Andreas Christensen left the country. He was gone.
Sure he did.
This connection between Edward Hutton and Andreas Christensen had not just happened a few weeks before the murder. It goes all the way back to London with Hutton and his ex-wife Caroline meeting Andreas back in 1971. And Edward Hutton's ex-wife, Caroline, was interviewed by the Desert Sun in 2013 and said, "I never knew anything about him. Have you ever met anybody you know for some years, but you've never known where they went to school, where their family is? He was like a cipher. He never talked about any of it. Just this quiet guy. She didn't really like him, but he was always hanging out with her then ex-husband, and she could never crack this guy. Super sketchy for years."
Yeah.
Playing bridge.
Why do rich old people in that time, I mean, I guess it's just because it was a popular game, but like, why is it always bridge? You know what I mean?
Yeah, they hadn't invented euchre yet. I don't know.
I don't know what that is.
Do rich people play Uno?
Could you imagine? That's actually a really funny picture. To see just a couple old rich people in dinner jackets sitting around the table. The fine silverware and china has been pushed aside, and or go fish.
Or like the match game
Yeah.
You know, they're playing, or like Monopoly of Life, you know,
Yeah.
all those dramatic things. As custody disputes over the children raged on, Edward Hutton left the entire family in London, and he now found himself in Houston, Texas, and became loosely tied to a new French restaurant, which I'm not going to pronounce because I can't, where he worked as a sommelier. Sommelier.
I was gonna don't try pronounce. Actually, I do want to hear you pronounce the French one.
La
you can
Soleil
say it, right?
Étoilé?
Le soleil étoilé?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just find that when I can't pronounce a word, I just really lay the accent on thick.
Yeah.
And
Kind of
then-
fake it.
Oh yeah, 100%. And then people, who don't speak the language, think, you know what I mean? And then I'll spout out some song lyrics maybe that I know in that language.
It's kind of a weird career move to go from London to Houston, Texas to work at a French restaurant, don't you think?
I mean, yeah.
Very not
Being
Palm
a
Spring-ish.
lumber empire
Yeah.
to working in a restaurant, working there, not owning it, operating it.
Working there.
Well, he was working as a sommelier.
Andreas Christensen would later join him. The owner of the Houston restaurant where Hutton worked, Henry Kelsey, suggested that authorities interview the maitre d' of, his name was David St. John, and the head waiter, Antonio Garrido. So pay attention to those two names as we go. I don't usually just point out random employees in French restaurants in Houston.
Like, there was a coat check boy there.
Yeah.
And,
His name-
remember him.
His name, too, was also Edward. He did not get any of the money, but he loved meeting new people.
Was due to be engaged to Sophia Edwards. Sophia Edwards.
Yeah. E.F. Hutton, Edward, yeah.
I got a great idea. Let's have a family of 30 people and name them all random versions of those names, just
Yeah.
like in a grab bag.
We haven't heard any Eddies yet, or Eds, right?
Bro, when you're rich, you can't go by Eddie.
Yeah, it's not going to work. It's part of the high-class nature of that name, right?
Yeah.
Edward. Garrido revealed in an interview with the FBI that he had bought a .45 caliber Star Model PD gun at a pawn shop for Christensen, since Christensen could not buy the gun legally as a foreigner. He also told officials that Hutton said he could not purchase a handgun because he didn't have a Texas driver's license. This is Hutton saying this. So Christensen and Hutton asked Garrido to buy the gun. Same kind of gun.
Well, and that's a really, I would imagine, very specific.
Very specific.
Very specific model.
Records at the Texas DMV show that Edward Hutton did, in fact, have a Texas driver's license. So who was telling the truth about why they needed Garrido to buy the gun for them? So David St. John, the other man, revealed to authorities that Hutton and Christensen had mentioned they were members of a prestigious gun club in London, and that Christensen was interested in buying a .45 caliber handgun for his collection. Again, since Christensen couldn't legally purchase a weapon as a foreigner, and the whole Hutton Texas driver's license thing, they persuaded Garrido to buy the gun for them, and Garrido confirmed that they accompanied Christensen to buy the gun, although he was unsure of the details. The gun had been registered in Garrido's own name. This allowed detectives to issue a wanted for questioning alert for Christensen. Because he had quietly left the country for Rhodesia, now known as Zimbabwe, they contacted Interpol, adding Christensen to their wanted list. So this guy's all over now. Like, he's got the gun, we don't know where he is. He already had some things going on with him. So interviewed twice by Houston detectives, Edward Hutton had an alibi for his September 25th date, and he had flown back to Texas and not left. Now, initially, he claimed he met Christensen at Los Angeles International Airport en route to visit his father, but denied taking Christensen with him on the visit. And then he later admitted to taking their trip. Hutton agreed to take a third interview and take a polygraph test, and then never showed up.
Yeah, I'll be there. What's the address? Is yeah, 2:00. Yeah, I'll see you there. Sir, you weren't writing anything down. You were just pretending to on you. Yeah, no, I'll be there.
So what do you think so far? Like, is this like red flag Edward Hutton?
Yeah, I think so. I think anybody involved with this gun, again, it's not like somebody went out and bought a .45 a random, it's a Colt 45 that there's a million of them at any random pawn shop or whatever because they were used in World War II. And, it's a really specific Spanish made, model number.
Yeah.
So I think anybody associated with that gun is in question.
Just never have a sketch.
And anybody like that, that comes like the guy, what's the guy's Christensen's first name?
Andreas.
Yeah, that he's just a criminal.
Yeah, he totally is. And
I mean, just that name, that, you know what I mean? Like I see him in the jacket, like with a hat down, sitting in the corner of a bar with a long cigarette thing.
I think as we talk about a lot of these cases, it's always like, do you always have to bring like, if you're trying to get away with something, do you always have to bring the sketchy guy with you?
Yeah, well, I'm just saying. He's got the name. He's popping around to like Zimbabwe and,
Right.
So where are you from? Don't worry about it. He's got the thick accent. I'm just hearing it. I don't know if he did, but,
Totally sticking out like a sore thumb in Houston, Texas.
I did nothing.
Undaunted, police figured out that Christensen was in Texas at the time of the murders and began working with what little evidence they had, the bullets and bullet fragments collected from the bodies in the scene. A forensics expert test-fired a borrowed Spanish-made Star PD .45 caliber pistol using CCI Spear ammunition. Only one manufacturer at that time made a gun with a right-to-left or left-to-right twist, narrowing down the brand and model that had been used in the murders. The bullets from the test shots matched the ones found at the murder scene. This was an exact match, but authorities still had no gun and no Christensen.
So they know that it came from that gun specifically?
Yeah, but they don't have the gun.
But they don't have the gun.
They don't have the gun, but they think they have a guy that bought a gun, either that exact gun.
So they know that it came from that model and brand of gun, but not that specific.
They need to get their hands on the gun.
Right, gotcha.
So days later, David St. John, the maitre d', called police in California and admitted he had not been completely candid during their Houston interview. Garrido purchased a .45 caliber handgun from the Bel Air gun shop just outside Houston for Christensen. Now, the case seemed to be on the verge of arrest when Houston authorities confirmed Garrido's purchase and obtained a receipt of sale from the gun shop owner. So they're getting more evidence. Yet authorities in California needed to get the receipt from the Houston store and interview the owner. But California superiors refused to support the trip due to budgetary concerns. And instead, an FBI contact of one of the superior's golf buddies was asked to pick up the receipt, and it took the FBI 2 months to do so. So this thing is just flailing, right? Like they're just, hey, we might have something there, but it's going to cost us too much, and it's going to take us too much time, and no one wants to bother with this. So it's getting further and further out.
Which is crazy because they have so much money.
Yeah, I know.
They're like, how much did they donate to the policeman's ball last year?
So other interviews that were happening in Houston, well, they're trying to get to know what the heck was happening from parties, that, people that may have seen these guys. Someone said that Christensen would brag about owning an island in the Indian Ocean. This is very strange. And he bragged about wanting to buy a .45 caliber pistol to take back to London to use at a shooting club. He keeps talking about this damn gun. You're trying to hide it. Why do you keep bringing it up? Hutton was visiting a friend in Manhattan in February 1979 when David St. John from the French Deli was found dead of a cocaine overdose in the bathtub of Hutton's Houston apartment.
Putting that money to good use, I see, huh?
The other guy from the French restaurant, Garrido, head waiter, died in September of 1980, gunned down. It's not funny.
Hey, you're the only one laughing, bro.
Okay, let me step back. Garrido, the head waiter at the French Deli, he died in September 1980.
What are you laughing at?
It just, I don't know why I'm laughing. He was gunned down. It's just really random and weird. Like, it doesn't make, like, this guy from a French deli is gunned down at the side of an Arkansas freeway by a hitchhiker he'd picked up on his drive. Both key witnesses were now dead, and the gun had not been found.
Why was that so funny?
I don't know why it's just like, why?
I was really expecting you to, like, they found him with something stuck in an orifice or something really bizarre, And he picked up a hitchhiker and.
But this like sophisticated man working at this French delicatessen is in an Arkansas freeway, and
That's weird.
like, and there's hitchhikers, and he's dead. Like, what's happening?
Yeah.
That's just a weird sentence to write, and then to say it out loud is even weirder.
Yeah. Almost funny, one could say.
Yeah. So, so obviously this seems really bad. Is this a huge coincidence that both of these men have died, or is this intentional, you think?
At this point, I have no idea who's guilty and what's happening, but I have to say Christensen looks to be involved.
Yeah.
Hutton looks to be involved. And yeah, it looks like they took out witnesses. I mean, how, a cocaine overdose.
Hitchhiker.
That's okay. Yeah. But yeah, the hitchhiker thing, weird. That's weird.
But the cocaine overdose is at Hutton's apartment.
Yeah. But I'm saying the other guy is, at least he was with someone he knew, right? And, they're partying. You could explain that one away a little bit. Yeah, hey, we were, it's 1979, man. We tried this new thing called cocaine.
Yeah.
Got a little out of hand. But a guy...
Well, I will say we won't know all the answers to all these things that pop up. It's just we like so many what feels like both intentional and random things are happening that I don't know that we ever figure out exactly how this happened, in what order it happened, and who was doing what.
Is this an unsolved case?
It is. Yeah.
I didn't know. I thought there was a resolution to it. Yeah.
They got close a couple times, and so when I talk about Garrido and I talk about David St. John and what happened to them, well, guess who else has something that goes south on him? Andreas Christensen. He was found unconscious in a London hotel room in October of 1978, and London police believed he may have tried to commit suicide, and then he disappeared again. We'll talk about where he goes next and wrap up this story after the break. Well, we were talking about Andreas Christensen. The case went cold. They couldn't find him until 1981 when they found him in Copenhagen for a robbery, and he was going by the name Alfred Borg. Remember that?
Yeah.
And fingerprints identified him as Andreas Christensen, of course. And he was on the run from embezzlement charges in Zimbabwe.
Well done.
When he was caught. Interpol had been alerted by...
Is there a period after each of those words?
Yes. I'm working on me. Interpol had been alerted by the American authorities to keep an eye out on this man way back in 1978, knowing that he had fled the States. And 3 years later, they finally found him. 3 law enforcement officials from the States, Fred Donnell, prosecutor Tom Douglas, and Detective Tom Barton, flew from the States to Copenhagen to question the man. The man they believed was now the prime suspect in the Friendly's murder case. They interviewed Christensen, often frustrated by the back and forth that he gave them, calling him intelligent and charming, yet arrogant like a con man with a plausible answer for everything. So this guy knows he's in the driver's seat. He's not going to fool with them. He doesn't care. There's nothing there. What are they going to do? Take him back to the States? They have nothing on him. And he knows that. So he said he had not been part of the Friendly's Palm Springs murder in the Palm Springs house, that there was curious connections that continued to pop up as the 3 questioned him. So it's not looking good for our friend, Andreas. And then it gets weird again. Christensen's former girlfriend leads authorities to a cave that contained hand grenades, explosive mines, weapons, and CCI Spear 45 caliber ammunition. So Christensen admitted having the same type, that identical gun as the murder weapon that had killed the Friendlies and their maid. And he said
it's Christensen's cave.
Yes.
Cave of...
Cave of Christensen.
Cave of munitions.
Yeah. He has a cave.
Who doesn't? I told you right away. It's the name. I could have told you this guy had a cave full of weapons.
P.O. box, you think? How's he get mail delivered?
There's I would imagine a mailbox fashioned out of rocks. and sticks.
Yeah, you just put it in the side of the cave, like in the wall. Yeah. Okay, so that gun.
Hide it, and he's got to hide a key in the little fake rock.
Yeah. So
poor Ian editing this one.
So Christensen said he had filed off the serial number of his 45, boarded a train for Austria, and eventually flushed it down the toilet.
The gun?
Yes, on the train. The gun had been disassembled, and the evidence was now flushed.
I got to tell you why no one ever solved this crime, because if it was anything like this, it's comical. The crime isn't comical, but like the whole, this guy Christensen and like, I don't even remember what was the guy's name. Like suspect number one, the family, the kids, Hutton.
Edward Hutton.
Yeah, I forgot all about that guy. This guy Christensen's like, hey, Flashy, over here.
I have a cave full of grenades and sure, I just got rid of the serial number on the gun.
Down the toilet on a train to Copenhagen. Yeah.
But what's interesting is Detective Donald, he actually still believed that the gun was tossed somewhere in the desert near Palm Springs, despite this. And the gun was never found, of course. Whether it was flushed on the toilet or in the middle of the desert, really weird.
I would love to see the toilet he claimed he flushed a gun down.
It's on a train, they're not exactly like building plumbing. I don't know if you know this, but it's not connected to anything.
Right, but what size hole is in an average toilet? I'm just, you got a round hole in a big L-shaped,
and it is
mechanics, physics,
and it is Europe after all. So like their sizes will differ.
Are you arguing for the you've been to Europe, I know you have.
They have the thing in the toilet, it's gun shaped, so you can fit it right in there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a 10-inch round hole. Keep your kids away.
The investigation is too time consuming, it's too expensive, and really just fades away. Christensen remained in Denmark after serving several years in jail for the bank robbery, and Hutton moved to Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Why he moved there, we don't know. So around 1990, Christensen shows up in L.A. around Palm Springs, and investigators said he wanted to come in and tell his side of the story, but he never showed up. It happens over and over in this case, right? I'm going to tell you everything, and then he never shows up. So what happened with this case? In 1995, Riverside County reopened the case, and even though it was the early days of DNA analysis, since blood from the scene of the crime could potentially be matched to Christensen's clothes he had on while back in London, officials had hoped to use this new ballistics evidence to revive the case. They had several shell casings from the floor. Securing a new set of prints from Christensen was informally attempted, but never secured. And the case remains open.
Well, if anybody's looking at this episode for information to try to pick this cold case back up, it's probably going to remain cold.
There was a lot of blood, and I don't know if they still have the DNA of that, but like without the murder weapon, without really knowing where this guy is, without really, like, the motive is still confusing, besides just, hey, I want money, but like, why was this guy hanging around Edward Hutton for so many years? Why did they go to Houston together? Why did they go to a French restaurant? Why were they trying to secure this specific model of a gun? It seems like it all makes sense, but a lot of times because local, police officials and then the FBI and then Interpol, like, who owns this? Like, you have to have a champion a lot of times. You need someone that says, I'm going to be the one that's going to solve this case. Yeah. I've got the money and the resources to do it. And I wouldn't say that they don't care at the end of the day, but there's something that's like, yeah, I just can't focus on this, so I'm not going to, so it just dies.
No, and you're right. The jurisdiction is even a problem in, like, locally. I mean, if you're in a state and you have a couple counties that are close to each other, I mean, and you have a murder that's in one county, or the body was found in a county, but something happened, or there was a crime scene in across the county line. I mean, even that can get tricky.
Yeah.
But add to that different places in Europe and Zimbabwe and,
Yeah.
you know, a couple different places in the U.S. I mean, yeah, that's
Then you've got to have the the
federal
ability.
and
You've
Interpol.
got
But
to have the ability to take them back to the States, and you better have a strong enough case if you're going to do that. Otherwise, you're going to lose. So
Yeah.
you need that murder weapon. You need that gun. So I think if they would have gotten that gun before the infamous cave toilet flush phase of this story.
And why does this guy have a cave? Where does that even fit? I mean, like, it's interesting, but like, and why do you have a cave full of like ammunition and grenades and landmines? What are you doing with landmines?
I know. You didn't. So remember how we started out this story. This is not how you expected this to end or where it was going to go.
No.
From,
Dinner jackets
Yeah.
and fine silver to, no, not at all where I expected this to go.
well, this has been an episode. I'll say that. This has been
been an episode.
We've both, I think, had tears in our eyes almost this entire episode. I don't know why. I just think sometimes the unbelievable leads to wild reactions, and it's not just us. It's Shane and Angelica making us laugh.
Yeah.
So we appreciate it, and we'll see you next time on How It All Went South.
See you guys.